In this video, I'm going to be explaining about default arguments. Let's consider you have this function to display numbers where it contains three parameters. Okay, for example, you call the function display numbers and you supply the value of some value like this, and when you run the program you will see that C is not displayed here. Okay, run again. Now as you can see here, when you call the function you are passing these three arguments. Okay, and this first argument will be passed here and will be displayed here, and this is what you get, number 5. The second argument you pass to B will be displayed to B here, and this is what you get, and so on with the C. Okay, so there is the arguments that you pass must always be 3. It cannot be more than that because it will produce error, or it cannot be less than that. Okay, if you supply less than that, it will also produce error. So for this type of functions you must always supply 3 arguments. Okay, you must always supply 3 arguments. But there are times when you can have the option where the function you want to call can receive, even though there are 3 parameters here, but you want to have the option where the arguments that you pass to the function can be 3, can be 2, can be 1, or can be no argument at all. In order to do that, for example, if I want to create this function so that it can receive 3 arguments or 2 arguments. Okay, in this case I need to create this as a default argument, which is I put it a default value 0 here. So in this case, if I call the function with 3 arguments, it will use all the 3 arguments that is passed to the parameter. But if I call the function with only 2 arguments, so what happens when you run the program, you will see that when you don't supply the last argument, okay, so this is the first one. For the first call to the function, you are supplying 3 arguments, so you will have 3. All 3 arguments are passed to the parameters. Okay, but when you call the function with only 2 arguments, the last one, because you did not supply to this function, okay, it's going to be replaced by the default value. So this is why you get 0 for C here. Okay, so this is what we call default argument. Okay, now here in this function, for this setup, you can supply 3 or 2, but you can actually create for all of them to be default argument. Okay, so if you have this kind of setup for this function, okay, that means this function can receive 3, 2, 1, or no argument at all. So if you run the program, you will see that the first one will produce all the values that you have passed. The second one, since you did not supply the last one, it will give you the default value, which is 0. The default value can be any value that you want. In this case, I just put it as 0. Okay, and this one you only supply 1, so the last 2 will use the default value, so that's why you have 2 of them are 0. Okay, and the last one, because you did not supply any value, any argument at all, so it will use all the default arguments. Now with this, you cannot supply something like this. With default argument, you cannot supply something like, for example, okay, you want to give the default argument to only the first and the last. This one cannot be done. It will produce an error. Okay, so it must always be like this. And if you don't want to supply the argument, it must always be towards the end. Okay, it cannot have something empty like this. And also, when you want to set this up for the default argument, you cannot have the first argument as the default argument, and the second one you choose not to have it as a default argument. You want to do it something like this, and the last one is a default argument, or it can be the last one is not a default argument, or you want to make it a default argument. So with this kind of setup, this is wrong. Okay, you cannot do this. So whatever default arguments that you want to do, okay, if you compile this, you will get error in this location. Okay, error in this location. Okay, so with this setup, if you want to create default arguments, make sure all of them are put towards the end. Okay, if you want to only have one, then only one at the end. If you want to have only two default arguments, then it must be from the two last arguments. Okay, from the two last parameters. Okay, and one more thing about default argument is that, let's say, okay, let's say this function does not have a prototype. Okay, let's say this function has a prototype, so I put it somewhere here, and I want to create a prototype for this function. You simply just copy the function header and put it here, put semicolon, and you can remove this variable name. Okay, and for this function header, you don't need to supply the default value. Okay, it's just need to be in the function prototype. Okay, that is for the case if you have the function prototype.